Finishing up on the End Zone presented by TiVo, Week 2, alongside Ian Eagle, Jason Horowitz. Glad to be with you every week, coming here on CBSSports.com and on your TiVo DVR via TiVoCast. The top 5 stories heading into each and every NFL week. And here in Week 2, it's the battle of 0-1, not to be 0-2. Because, Ian, as we have talked about and everybody has talked about year in, year out, it is so hard to make the playoffs when you're 0-2.
You are a huge stat guy. We know that. Have you done the research?
I have numbers right here. Would you like to hear them?
You've done the research.
On my pretty little paper. Would you like to hear them?
How many 0-2 teams, what percentage of teams that start 0-2 actually qualify for the playoffs?
About 12.5% since 1990. That's what it says right there.
12.5.
12.5 since 1990 have made the playoffs at 0-2. But if you go to the kiss of death is when you're 0-3. Because only 2 teams.
Don't
you don't want to do that next week?
Show. No,
all
that's
right.
next week's show.
Can I tell you who the 0-3 teams are that have made it?
All right, go
All
ahead.
right, fine. The Bills and the Lions, the only 2 teams to make it since 1993 at 0-3 to the playoffs. The Lions when they had Scott Mitchell when he threw for 4,000 yards and then a couple hundred catch receivers, Herman Moore, Brett Perriman, Barry Sanders had his big year. That was 95.
Do you have intimate knowledge on this team?
I may have watched that team back in the day. But let's get into the matchups of teams that are 0-1 against 0-1.
So this is guaranteed.
Somebody will be 0-2. And then fans can start hoping for the number 1 draft pick.
Well, look, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, we'll start with that one. We know New Orleans is a quality team. 0-2 is not realistic for this Saints squad. For Tampa Bay, this is a down year.
Yep.
It's a transition year. John Gruden probably will not be the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when it's all said and done after 2007.
You're burying him already?
Yeah.
Are you going to bury Romeo Crennel too?
Are we going to have a TiVo rewind for next year, for 2008? Because you can bring this segment back.
Well, you can talk to the TiVo people and ask them.
I'm telling you right now that John Gruden is in big trouble.
Do you want to throw some dirt on anybody else?
No, I'm just honest.
All right.
I just tell it like it is in the NFL.
All right, fine. Well, here's the other question, though. I mean, because we talked about how hard it is to make the playoffs, but you brought this up earlier in the week. But Kansas City made it last year after starting 0-2. And Herm Edwards was in his first year, and he brought the team back in, so we'll see how that goes. But my concern here is you look at the teams, Atlanta and Jacksonville, what happened last week with the Jaguars will not happen every week. They will not give up. They will not be the worst rush defense in the NFL. No. They are too good at that. They have 2 good defensive linemen.
That was an aberration.
Chicago is a good team, and they are in the NFC. Kansas City, if you're a Chiefs fan, you obviously are worried about their offense. You called that game last week.
You have to be worried about their offense.
And then the Jets and Baltimore, the other one in this situation.
That's the biggest one.
That's the biggest one because both those teams were playoff teams last week. The Jets against the Patriots, and obviously people talking about the spying situation, but they got blown out. That doesn't come into the reason why they lost the game.
And that's not a huge shock that they lost to the New England Patriots.
And it wouldn't be a shock if they lost to the Ravens either.
Yeah, but the problem is the schedule is set up, and people aren't going to focus in on that. If you're 0-2, you're 0-2. And the numbers don't lie, as you discussed. 0-2 against New England, Baltimore, it's still 0-2. And the Jets certainly head into Week 2 with a lot of question marks regarding their quarterback situation, whether or not they can bounce back after getting humbled. A sobering loss to the New England Patriots. It's one thing to lose to New England. It's another thing to get outclassed the way that they did. And I think it just showed how far the Jets are away from being the kind of team they want to be. New England's the measuring stick, not only in their division, but in the AFC. They come back against a Baltimore team that very well could have won their opener against the Cincinnati Bengals. It was a terrible call down the stretch. We know that on Todd Heap. Who knows what happens if this game goes to overtime? To me, Baltimore brings the advantage, except starting quarterback. They've got their own question marks with Bowler possibly stepping in.
And the other aspect of that is that they don't have the air attack that Tom Brady and the Patriots had last week. The Baltimore does not. Derek Mason is not going to be Randy Moss. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to be that situation. They have a good tight end in Todd Heap. But you mentioned the fact that the offensive pass interference, they committed 6 turnovers.
They did.
They should have lost the game anyway. They should have lost by a lot more than 7. So it doesn't make a difference.
And even with that said, they had an opportunity.
Baltimore, the way they played, deserves to be 0-1. The Jets, the way they played, deserve to be 0-1. Chicago, the same thing, but they played a tough opponent in San Diego. Kansas City, no offensive. These teams deserve, after last week, to be 0-1. The question is who bounces back. I think it's New Orleans. I think Jacksonville in a big way. Obviously Chicago. And you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the Jets will win in Baltimore. It's a limb.
We agree on 3 of the 4.
Well, the 3 of the 4 are the obvious ones. So tell me that Kyle Bowler is a guy that's going to beat the Jets.
Home opener for Baltimore? Yeah, I think their defense is going to be too much for Kellen Clemens to handle in his first start. And I think the Jets were shaken, very much shaken, following their Week 1 loss. Now, unless Clemens catches lightning in a bottle and the team responds to him, I think the Jets are staring at 0-2 and a very difficult 0-2 to start off their 07 season. I think the Jets, though, could qualify as one of those teams that's able to lift themselves up out of the 0-2 start and still be a playoff team. There's still a lot of football left. Yep. They're not 0-2 like Kansas City is going to be 0-2 2007.
Or Atlanta or Tampa Bay.
Agreed.
Those are the situations. But we could be wrong. You never know. That's why they play the games on the field, and that's why everybody says.
And that's why they tape the show, so we can play it back next week.
With this little thing right here, and we'll talk about the TiVo Rewind next week. For Iron Eagle, I'm Jason Horowitz. That'll do it for the End Zone, presented by TiVo. Glad you could be with us here in Week 2. You can always rewatch this or any segment throughout the year on demand, available both at CBSSports.com and on your TiVo DVR via TiVo Cast. I'll see you in this living room next week.
Sounds good.
You guys can watch us in your living room. See you.